Okay, next question today. Does classical conservatism still exist? This is an interesting question. When we talk about classical conservatism in the United States, understand that the idea of conservatism, the roots of conservatism, go back actually to the French Revolution, when you had conservatives who were often French intellectuals saying they wanted to sort of go back to the previous way that France was organized rather than the post-revolution France. When we say classical conservatism in the United States, we're not talking about what things were like pre-French Revolution. My understanding is that conservatism is basically talking about sort of like the 1950s, where you still had there was less awareness of and opposition to not only sometimes systemic, but actually codified racism, out and out sort of glorification of patriarchy, even crony capitalism in some ways, where it was more open, where maybe now crony capitalism is in some sense more hidden. That's what I understand as classical conservatism being in the United States. And sometimes it's presented as we want so-called family values based on the Bible, as well as a very low regulation environment, which goes towards that crony capitalism thing that I said. The basic reality is that, as it is, the idea of conservatism is a form of sleight of hand, where what they're really talking about is classical conservatism in many cases is limiting the structures of power to privileged groups, whether it's men over women, whether it's business elites over workers, whether it's so it's not just a class analysis, it's not just a race analysis. That's fundamentally, though, what we mean by classical conservatism. It exists today in some vestiges among certain Republicans. It's funny because the people that Trump calls rhinos, Republicans in name only, saying they're not really Republicans anymore, that's kind of where more classical conservatism still exists. It's people sort of like Mitt Romney. It's people, I hate to say it, Democratic Senator Joe Manchin is kind of like a 1950s conservative in some ways. They are ostracized by the Republican Party now because the Republican Party is no longer about the types of issues people like Mitt Romney care about. Even John McCain was sort of beyond what classical 1950s type conservatism was. The Republican Party has become about owning the libs, about rhetoric over substance, about culture type issues divorced from actual policy. Even when you look at the more social issues, even calling them cultural issues instead of social issues is interesting. Before, when it was, gay marriage, abortion, etc., it linked to policy in more of a direct way than a lot of these culture issues. When you talk to a lot of these Republicans who want to fight against cancel culture and you say, great, what's the solution? There's often really no policy attached to it because they will quickly realize the policy that would come to mind would be outrageously authoritarian and supposedly against many of their stated values. So, does classical conservatism still exist in the United States? To some degree, it's increasingly on the outs within the Republican Party. It does exist, but it is not predominantly what the Republican Party today has decided to be in favor of. Keep sending your questions in. I will keep answering them on every Friday show. We've got a great bonus show for you today. To get instant access, just become a member at joinpakman.com. When you see me sitting here at the microphone, oftentimes I'm wearing a shirt by a company called Teddy Stratford, and I love these shirts so much that I asked Teddy Stratford to be a sponsor of the show. And here's why I like their shirts so much. With other slim fit button-up shirts, you often get this weird looking gap between the buttons where it looks kind of stretched out, but Teddy Stratford actually has a patented zipper that's hidden underneath the buttons, which secures the shirt against your chest so it doesn't look stretched. And most importantly, it just provides a nicer looking fit overall. And the entire shirt is specially designed to really improve the way your upper body looks when you're wearing it. It also has a special type of collar that prevents it from drooping down and spreading open, which is another really great thing about these shirts. All of these things really do a lot to make a big difference when you're looking at a shirt. And that's why I like to wear Teddy Stratford shirts on the show. Go check them out at davidpakman.com/Teddy. The link is down below, and they'll give you 15% off your first order if you use the coupon code PAKMAN at checkout.